So when it comes to sports, are transgender athletes playing fair? We're joined now by someone who has first-hand experience of both the competitive world of sport as well as transitioning in the public eye. Kelly Maloney, formerly boxing promoter. Frank, good morning.
Morning.
And we're rejoined by Professor Ben Carrington from the University of Texas at Austin. Welcome back. Also joining us down the line from our London newsroom is Delia Johnston from Trans in Sport. Now, this advises sports bodies on transgender issues.
Morning.
Kelly, morning. Let me start with you, Kelly. One of the arguments here that's being heard is that trans women remain as strong and as powerful physically as men as they were when they were men. Has that been true for you?
No, I have to disagree with that because, I mean, I could do boxing, take the pads in the gym and that, and I can't do that no more. My strength, my muscle mass has deteriorated.
Would then, you would say, obviously trans women would not have an advantage, a competitive advantage over women?
No, I don't think they'd have any advantage over women. I think, you know, they have to have a certain level of hormone level. Their testosterone has to be a certain level, so they're competing on level playing fields as far as I'm concerned.
Physically, what has happened to you in your transition in terms of, you say you have much less muscle mass now, and you're physically not as strong. How has that happened over what
I've actually shrunk a little bit, to be honest.
Have you?
Yeah. And my whole training programme has changed the way I train myself personally, because I always trained every day. I'm not as competitive as I was, but I don't think that doesn't mean women are not competitive. I think that's just something personally that I went through. I just feel that, you know, they have the right to compete in sport if they're legally inside the boundaries that are set by the Olympic Committee.
There is an issue here, Douglas, isn't there, of equality, and the Olympics is promoting this message. Yes,
I mean, there is. I mean, there's also, I think, in this discussion, I mean, an element of manners, which is also important. Germaine Greer, who's been a very outspoken critic of transgenderism, said herself, you know, nobody wants to be rude, everyone should be courteous about things. However, people also have to be careful, I think, not to believe other people's version of themselves as itself being true. So if somebody is born a man and transitions to become a woman, and lives and feels as a woman, does not mean that everybody else then has to agree that that person has now become a woman. And there are then tensions, and this is one such tension, I would suggest, is in sporting events. Would people regard somebody born as a man who's become a woman as a woman? I don't think that's obvious.
They may be born as a man, but it's their brain and their gender issue. Throughout their whole life, they have had trouble with themselves, struggled with themselves, to come to terms with themselves because they know they were born in the wrong body.
And the argument of that is then you were in the wrong body, so you were born with a man's body, and whether or not that fairly, and I'm going to ask Ben this now, whether that fairly, when you've transitioned, whether that fairly represents a woman's body in terms of competing equally. Do you think that works?
I mean, I think there's a number of assumptions there that underlie this whole discussion, and one of them is this notion of a level playing field, and I think that's actually a myth. Sports aren't a level playing field. Depending on where you're born in the world, you have different access to coaches, equipment, different technologies available to you. Depending on the altitude in which you're born and that you get raised in, you can have advantages over other people. So we kind of start from this false notion that there exists a level playing field, and for some reason, people who have transitioned are kind of cheating in some way. And I think that that's simply not true, and I think the other part of it is that we become hyper-focused on men that transition into women, but we don't discuss it the other way around.
And I suppose the reason that is because physically, the assumption is that men are stronger than women, greater lung capacity, narrower hips, broader shoulders, denser muscle capacity. So the transition appears to be unfair, or on that playing field.
But if you go back to tennis, Rennie Richardson, who was the famous American that transitioned, was a very good tennis player as a male, and she was only moderately successful as a female when she transitioned. So it doesn't give them any extra strength or any extra power. Yeah,
and I also just think it's based upon this notion that women are fragile, that they're fragile creatures who need to be a protected category. And I think part of it is this notion actually of the assumption that women simply can't compete against men. So I think maybe some of the concerns often expressed by men is actually the fear that maybe some of the women athletes could actually be better than the men. And if you look at the distinctions that are made, it's completely arbitrary. So, as was pointed out, the kind of testosterone levels that they now set at around 10 nanomoles, it's completely arbitrary. So if a woman has more than 10 per litre, then they are seen to be not a woman anymore. So there's a maximum level of testosterone that female athletes can have, but there isn't a maximum for men. So actually, you're kind of in this kind of paradoxical situation where artificially we create these kind of distinctions between kind of men and women in terms of who can transition and who can't. But I think what that really underlies is the fact that we have these kind of, sports is incredibly gender segregated, and it kind of, I think this is kind of thrown into the public domain a whole range of other issues which are predicated upon this notion that we have a binary sex, where actually things are much more complex than that.
Is it specific, Lola, that sport here needs to be a special case?
There's an issue of identity, which I get, which is what Kelly pointed to, that people who feel like they were born in the wrong body, and then I think there's an issue of biology. And I'm not a doctor and I'm not a medical scientist, so I can't speak to that. But as a woman, I know that a lot of men, even men who might be my height, are probably stronger than me. And I'm wondering if, if what you're saying is correct, that, these notions of gender and stuff are just sort of artificial, then should we not just have men and female competing with each other across sports anyway? OK,
well, let's bring in Delia Johnston, who's in our newsroom. And Delia, I suppose what we're talking about is whether or not there is a level playing field. And I wonder your thoughts on what if transgender women start winning in women's events. Is that when the discussion is going to move, or the comments are perhaps going to become more negative?
There is a potential. I mean, obviously media will react the way media always reacts. But if you look at the cold, hard science of this, if you look at the International Olympic Committee's latest guidelines, it's based upon testosterone levels, hormone levels. Now, sport is always elitist, particularly at elite level. And you always go for physical advantages. You're athletes, male athletes, female athletes, who are very tall, long legs, slow heartbeat. So sport always selects the best. Now, obviously, if somebody who has a gender history wins at Olympic, there will be shouts of foul. That is not the case. Also, the IOC, International Olympic Committee, now are beginning to realise that chromosomes, i.e. X, XX and XY, are not the definitive measure, because there are a number of people out there with variations of that. And that, again, is causing some issue with the IOC, how to measure that. And we all remember certain athletes which were put in the media headlines, queried about their gender. And that was proven categorically, in this case, they were female. But their chromosome count was projecting them as male.
Delia, a quick word, if you wouldn't mind. You know the two athletes who are being considered for the British Olympic team. And are there concerns about how much scrutiny they could come under?
I mean, one, from my understanding, has already pulled out or going to remove themselves. The other one is watching all this media activity, certainly from the piece last week, the Mail on Sunday, and media in between, and realises that they do not want to be under scrutiny. Now, if you look at it from another sport, if you look at it from, say, football or rugby, are there many gay players out there who are currently participating at the peak level, particularly football, rugby? And those who do come out then get victimised or pressurised by the press. Well, an athlete, as everybody knows, has to be at 100% peak physical and 100% peak mental to compete. If there is a fear of being outed or ridiculed, then that athlete is not going to be at their best.
Kelly?
Well, obviously, sexuality and gender are two different things, so you can't even compare them. And if there is an athlete out there that is taking part, she knows the risk she is taking. I mean, I tried to remove myself from public life because of my previous history, but the press hounded me and found me. Now, I believe this athlete, she has to come forward, and if she's good enough, compete and take what happens to her.
Let's hear what our viewers are saying. Tommy, you've been gauging reaction on this.
That's right. Lots of people getting involved. Just to point out, you played golf against Colin Montgomery.
I did.
And you out-putted him. So just saying, I heard that story before the show.
The rest of his game was far superior.
Yeah, let's focus on the putting. Right, Ken at home saying they may have had gender reassignment, but their bodies have all the benefits of a male physiology, giving them an advantage over natural-born females. We also have a comment here from Chris, who says, why not have a transgender section for all competitions, so its own league, as it were? On top of that, we have Helen saying that would be cheating to have men and women competing together. There are reasons why men and women compete in different events. Yvonne saying, as a mother of a transgender person, I think if they are not allowed to take part in the Olympics, it will knock back years of fighting for equality. And finally, Lee saying, how can this possibly be a fair contest? So questioning the fairness of it.
Absolutely. So many different views. Tommy,
Yeah.
thanks very much. Douglas, quick word from you.
Very quickly, one can have respect for people and their lifestyle choices without having to pretend that, for instance, chromosomes don't matter, or that they're entirely irrelevant, or they're amorphous, and so on. The second thing is, as for specific sports, your putting contest, it may not matter, and people may not care what people were born as, but I mean, just to put it out there, how would people feel about a person who was born a man boxing against a woman as a woman?
Kelly?
That wouldn't happen because of regulations. There are rules. You know, at the end of the day, you don't choose your gender. I don't wake up one morning and say, I want to put on a dress. I want to be a woman so I can win a gold medal. That's just a ridiculous attitude. This is a condition you are born with, a condition you have to suffer with, and a condition you have to come to terms with. And the sooner society accept that and start to understand more about it, the better it's going to be for everybody.
Ben.
I just think this is actually a non-issue. I think we should stop referring to transgender women, if they define themselves as women, as transgender women. They are women. And the notion that there's this kind of going to be this avalanche of male athletes, kind of going over to the women's side simply isn't true. No. For 4 years, you have to self-identify as a woman. You have to go through hormonal treatment and/or castration in order to get your T levels down to below 10. Douglas, if you want to become
can I just say, I don't think anyone's saying that anyone thinks it's a fast route to a gold medal or an easy route. Nobody's saying that.
I think what I'm saying is this has been a great discussion. Thank you.
You didn't, frankly, have the balls to put country before party.